So we are studying Lojong, the 7 points of mind training, and um, it is a delight and a marvel to me to see the beauty of this training, to see how it is structured, and to revisit it in depth. It was the basis of the training where I did monastic training at Gampo Abbey. And so I certainly worked with it intensively over a period of 4 years. And now, 25 years later, what a delight. So I just want to review where we are and share with you why I'm so delighting in the structure. So the first was, why do we practice? So training in the preliminaries, seeing death as imminent, life is short, and everything is impermanent. And then the overall view. The overall view was essentially how to be able to rest in space, or rest in our nature, or rest in alaya. And now we are working with, all right, things may be a little calmer on the cushion, but what happens when we're off the cushion, when we're not resting in the alaya? And again, it's a presentation of view. And this is the last, it's actually the last 2 slogans before we go into daily life. You know, you're hit by a truck of samsara, and what do you do on the spot? So this is preparing us in that sense for the view. So we're working with 2 slogans this morning. In all things, train with the slogans. In all activities, train with the slogans, and begin the sequence of sending and taking, or Tonglen, with yourself. So in this group, the first one was, at all times, Tonglen, or sending and taking, should ride the breath. Then, what do we encounter in Tonglen? Friends, enemies, and neutrals. And in fact, every experience we have in all of our senses, we have like, dislike, and there's a sense of the like, dislike, and escape we think of as a poison, but it can be a seed of wisdom. In all activities, train with the slogans is just sort of a preparation that this training condenses the Dharma into such clear pith statements that we want to have them accessible and available all the time, so that we're always reminded moment to moment. And what do we especially need to be reminded of? Sending and taking should ride the breath, and begin sending and taking with yourself. So we often hear quote after quote after quote about mindfulness, and how mindfulness is the training of all the Buddhas, maintain mindfulness at all time. This is essentially like a Mahayana overlay. It's not only mindfulness, but mindfulness and bodhicitta training combined. So mindfulness, but mindfulness as a bodhicitta practice continuously. It's not mindfulness alone. So essentially, we could tell a sharpshooter they should have mindfulness, and with one pointed concentration, they could learn how to hit a target better. So mindfulness by itself isn't necessarily anything other than concentration. Mindfulness combined with bodhicitta is a dharma path. So there's the layer of reminding us that it is the intention of using mindfulness so that bodhicitta is always the first and foremost thought. And then we will follow in the rest of the 100 slogans, we're just at 10, are about, okay, in an emergency, this is how to bring the bodhicitta practice to mind. But there is the view, it's not only mindfulness, it's not only the bodhicitta practice of mindfulness, but it all begins with starting with yourself. So I'm referring back to that image we had last week, that of the metamorphosis of the caterpillar dissolving the caterpillar nest, and the imaginal cells in the caterpillar drawing on the nourishment of the dissolved caterpillar proteins that becomes the butterfly. Which is to say, we have Buddha nature and we have all of our confusion, and it is this confusion that turns into the seed of wisdom that is the nourishment that becomes our fully realized potential. And the adage to begin sending and taking oneself with oneself is to see that the purpose of Tonglen isn't to reinforce our ego or to be some sort of spiritual bypassing to think essentially thoughts and prayers, are enough, but more to see that Tonglen is training our minds to work with the difficulties of life and to bring them so clearly to mind so that we can see where our work is. So we begin Tonglen with that fresh open space. We begin Tonglen with the view of Buddha nature. And that flash of bodhicitta, or that flash of resting in alaya, or however we'd like to express it, is a way of reminding ourselves that this spacious heart mind is always open and that we are the ones that shut it down. And so Tonglen is teaching us how we are shutting it down and how to see where that borderline and boundary is so that we can soften right there and liberate that particular obstacle to our returning to our nature of the vast and open space. Again, the caveat is we're doing it at our own rate of speed and in a way that is safe and appropriate for us. So it's not about in any way endangering ourselves or standing in front of someone with a weapon and saying, I'm going to remove my boundary. It's more, what are our internal obstacles? And we can see that when we're in a safe space, so that when the person in front of us with the weapon arises, first we might step to the side, and secondly, we might face our fear, and we might be able to have the strength of bodhicitta that meets the moment with a calm, loving kindness. But for most of us right now, we're taking the time to step aside to see what are our blocks, our fears, and how can we have this force of bodhicitta that meets every moment with a fearless, calm, and open heart. So, in terms of Tonglen, then let's look at this. So, then we, in the second stage, we work with a difficulty that's more neutral. So we're working with a smaller bite, and then we work with greater and greater capacity with suffering. But what we're doing essentially is we're looking at the nowness of exactly this moment of life. And we know that anytime we look at the nowness of all that is arising in samsara or this moment of life, it's always a mixture. Certainly there's joy, but there is pain and suffering. And we want to be able to hold all of that and not turn and run in fear. And so we see what is our strategy when we're faced with the pain of life or our response of pain to an experience. And we get very familiar with that strategy. So begin the sequence of sending and taking with oneself is, all right, let's look at my mind and how my mind is responding in this moment. Witnessing that, not with judgment or accusation, but simply witnessing it. And I was reminded of reactivity and reactivity to pain in the last couple of weeks because I'm working with some health challenges that drew me to acupuncture. And probably most of you have experienced acupuncture, but I have to say I went to an acupuncturist 30 years ago, and it was so gentle, and after the treatment, you know, they let me rest for a half an hour, and it's not that kind of acupuncture this time. I'm seeing someone who's working with a very different style, and I notice I get to a threshold of pain with this acupuncturist. So her style is to work with obstacles directly and release them in quite a painful way. So I let her know, you know, after the end of an hour, I was reaching my threshold, and she said, well, what I say to people at this point is, expecting something wise, don't be a wimp. So we're beginning sending and taking with ourselves with the attitude of, okay, we're courageous bodhisattva warriors now, so when we're looking at our reactivity and our shadow side, the first is don't be a wimp. But then, oh, I see, just a second, there are a couple more people. But then I had to laugh because this week when I was working with her, again, after an hour reaching a threshold, and I was about to say, how much longer is this treatment? She said, well, what she notices as a healer is that after a while, these direct releases that I experience as painful, and I express that painful, she says, people stop associating it as pain, and they start associating the physical sensation as, oh, I see, that is healing. And so there's a sense of the mental judgment of pain, and I don't like this, to a shift to a mental judgment of, oh, this is a healing moment. I welcome this healing. And so when we're working with in Tonglen, receiving and looking at our reactivity and looking at, let's say, the different shadow sides that we think of as poisons that we're reluctant to see, we're afraid of, we don't want to see. And also, when we face a moment that is painful for us and take it in, there can be a physical sensation as we rest in that moment because our muscles may be clenched in fear, so it can actually feel a little physically as well as mentally painful in looking at our shadow side. over time, as we work with this, we're less and less fearful, and we do start to see it as an opportunity for healing, uncomfortable as it is. And so the fear and discomfort gradually is replaced by an increasing response of curiosity and a increasing welcome, even though it is uncomfortable and may be slightly physically difficult. And so this becomes a really wonderful transition. And one of the quotes that I was looking at, or one of the Dharma concepts I was looking at in this context, is when we look at our own shadow side, when we're receiving and seeing how quickly we shut down, how difficult it is to take on this the suffering because we fear it, or expand it to the difficult people in our lives, and we go, I feel guilty about this, I'm ashamed, I'm so narrow-minded, all those different kinds of things. When we shift from judging that to seeing in a relaxed, open way with curiosity, we're shifting worlds. We're shifting our whole future. We're shifting habits of lifetimes. And as we look at who we are and our strategies, faced with pain, I was talking about last week how there is a way of covering that pain with consumption, whether it's addictive substances or escapism. When we look at that strategy with the same kind of transparency and honesty, we see that covering actually may have a brief flash of relief and then opens, accumulating more layers of pain. And so we can really start to see that our strategies cause us more pain in the long run. Whereas when we find the courage to be less wimpy and sit with a moment of the meeting whatever suffering there is with that feeling of resistance or feeling pain, and we shift into curiosity, we start to see actually that releases something that actually is the beginning of uprooting a pattern or a fear or one aspect of our obscurations, and that it has it's not replaced by more pain. It's in fact replaced by a veil of ignorance lifting. And again, seeing this in the smallest of ways gives us more confidence in the Dharma and allows us to take a stronger refuge in the Dharma and allows us to build our courage for when we get to more difficult things. So I can't think of too many things I've totally uprooted in life, but I can say I've totally uprooted craving for cigarettes. In my teens and 20s, definitely I smoked a lot. And it was definitely hard to stop smoking. And now I don't think of it at all. It's totally gone. And so when we talk about pulling something up from the root and a veil of ignorance lifting, that is the liberative quality of really facing the learning that we're doing in Tonglen. Why are we shutting down? what is the fear? What is it about our insecurity and craving that makes it hard to give? How to just even visualize giving away. So beginning the sequence of sending and taking with oneself is opening that door to extraordinary learning and really seeing what Tonglen is doing as a practice to teach us the Dharma. So I want to conclude with the wonderful quote from Machig Labdron, the wonderful enlightened woman, I forget which century, who spread the Chud practice. But in terms of facing one's shadow side, she has the five points. Confess your hidden faults, or be transparent. Don't be wimpy. Look at your hidden faults. You don't have to confess it to anyone. You have to be transparent towards yourself. Approach that which you think is repulsive. Look at that caterpillar reservoir of our confusion, that the parts of ourselves that we find so difficult to accept because we find them repulsive. Help those you think you cannot help. Anything you're attached to, give that. Let it go, and go to the places that scare you. So this essentially is another pith about what this training is leading towards, what the next series of slogans are. We're going to the places that scare us, but we're going with courage, and we're going with confidence in the view, confidence in our Buddha nature, confidence in the practice that we've been doing up to this point, and confidence in the three jewels that this is turning our confusion into wisdom. So let's sit with this and contemplate your experience in the past month of Tonglen, the instructions of Machig Labdron. Let's sit with it for a minute, and then we'll do a short on-the-spot Tonglen. So just contemplating today's slogan, beginning, sending and taking with oneself, which is creating an attitude of curiosity to the whole breadth of our heart-mind. Not judging good or bad, but seeing it all as a way to learn and grow. So for the folks who just came in, we're organizing how to pay attention to the waiting room, but I'm sorry you missed the opening talk this morning, and it will be on our Vajra Dakini Facebook page. And now we're just settling in to this moment of nowness, working with accepting just what is in our life at this moment, not trying to resist pain or react to pain in ourselves or in the world, but breathing it in and sending out whatever equanimity we have, whatever loving kindness we have, and letting us sit with this moment. Even in so simple an instruction, that vast spaciousness that is present and accessible, how are we defending our heart-mind from that experience? What fears arise just resting with our lives right at this moment as it is? What thoughts arise about our extended family and world that seem hard to just breathe in? Where is the resistance? Where is the shutting down? And how do we return to openness? And we see that sitting in openness, all our own different feelings can arise. Breathing in the breadth of those feelings without excluding, and allowing it to dissipate in the openness. And exhaling equanimity, peacefulness, loving kindness. Turning to the world with all of its glory and all of its pain, breathing in the wholeness of that, not picking and choosing what is good and what is painful. Breathing in this moment of life, and exhaling, offering whatever it is you have to offer. Not formulating stories, but just noticing my heart mind is shutting down. If these thoughts arise, let me address the shutting down. Just noticing when we start to judge ourselves, returning to openness, and similarly, noticing when we start judging beings in the world and returning to openness. And so now we have time for discussion, and we'll close the live Facebook first. Bodhicitta, excellent and precious mind. Where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. So now we have